It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis, and I am the host of the show. Kia ora to you. I've got the portable podcast desk set up on the lounge table. Busy times at the moment. I'll explain why in a second, but also I'll explain why I'm going to make this as brief an introduction as possible. It's because last episode I did the longest introduction thus far on one of the episodes of Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, and it's because I was chatting to a mayoral candidate, as I am on this episode. Last episode was Jake Laws, the youngest candidate in 2022's Auckland mayoralty race. This episode is with Efeso Collins, who is one of the what's the expression? One of the main horses in the race. You know, you get people who become candidates and put their name forth, and they get some votes, and then you get those that they've got a. It's going to be one of those few, and Efeso is one of those. So anyway, I did a more broad and quite lengthy introduction where I waxed lyrical about a few things around being mayor, around the different candidates. Another prominent candidate was discussed at length in that intro as well. The reason I'm very busy at the moment is I'm at the pointy end of an event that I developed from scratch. And I have basically organised from every angle and aspect, you name it, you name anything that's involved in putting on essentially what we're calling a summit, the New Zealand Podcasting Summit. And I've wrangled it all together, and we're 2 days or 3 days out from the event. Actually, it's Tuesday, it's on Saturday. So, God, it feels like it's only 2 days away, but shiver me timbers, it's 4 or 5 days away. But, it's been a lot of work. I got paralysis today. I had so much on my list of things to do that it took me a really long time to do one task. I need to go and sit in the COVID soup hot pool at my gym. No, I don't. But it's been a lot. If you are interested, it's not just for current podcasters. You might be interested in podcasting, thinking about starting a podcast. You might know someone else who's thinking about starting a podcast. There are still tickets available. It's going to be a great event. It's a real cross-section of Aotearoa's podcasting community, from people, making stuff with good budgets and teams at RNZ, long-form narrative stuff, to bedroom podcasters with really good following and audiences around them. Go have a look. I don't want to sell you too long in this intro. Go have a look at nzpodsummit.com. To Efeso, as I say, look, the episode, the conversation will speak for itself. For those, if you're perhaps new to a conversational podcast, then you go, why is this blimmin' host banging on about his life as well as asking Efeso about his? It's because it is a conversation rather than an interview. And I actually said to Efeso at the beginning, look, I'm not going to try any gotcha moments. It's not one of those kind of shows. Call that is that attack dog journalism? Nowhere near it. It's getting to know this guy, where he came on up, his background, why he wants to be mayor. Could I have asked a few more hard-hitting questions at points? Yeah, but as I say, that's kind of not the spirit of the show. I like Efeso. I had to ponder about the chat with him afterwards, and it's one of those, walks the walk, talks the talk guys. Big background in basically helping out people in communities, from what I could gather. So I think that's a lovely place to start. And really, it's all about getting to the end of the conversation and enjoying every darn moment of it along the way. And the big question I wanted to ask is, have you chatted to Phil? Efeso, have you chatted to Phil about what to expect? Great, like the show. Subscribe to the show, all the social media online type things that are koha for free projects like this these days. If you can follow me, like me, leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on the app you're using. Follow my social media, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Twitter. That would be grand. It's always good seeing a few more people appear week on week. All right, so thank you for your time, Efeso, and enjoy this, folks, and good luck for the Mayoralty Race 2022. I now know more about local body politics. In the last few weeks, I found out more than I knew in my 45 years on the planet.
This is Dr. Tannen's Verbal Highs.
What you had for breakfast, the classic mic check question.
Well, I skipped breakfast, but I did have
Shocking.
coffee.
You're running for mayor. You need a breakfast.
I know, yeah. It's probably one of the few times I've skipped breakfast. Usually I'm out of the house with cheese and crackers, so it's probably not a good thing.
So what have you got planned for the weekend? You get a lot of time off, or?
Well, at the moment there's a lot on, so we'll be doing some visits through East Auckland this weekend.
Wow, so you're into it already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really it's just it's the build-up. It's getting out, meeting people, having the odd conversation here and there.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, actually, it's quite a nice introduction to the campaign. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the tyranny of geography with campaigning in Auckland. Like, how do you get around? Roller skates? Or, you can't have a chopper or something these days. It's not that ecologically sound. But, seriously, getting around's that's a logistical thing you got to work with to get as many places as possible in a day, right?
Yeah, and so it takes quite a bit of planning. And often what we're trying to do these days is, if we're, say, in East Auckland, we'll do the whole day there. So we might visit Pakuranga, Howick, and then go through to Glen Innes or something like that. And the idea is that way when we're either walking or we're in a bus. And then when we've got to go further abroad, like last weekend we were in Northcote, Birkenhead, we had to drive over, but we tried to station ourselves in one place so that we weren't driving so much. So it does take a bit of planning, because our preference is to go by public transport or walk.
You're Otara native, born and bred?
Yep, so born here and at Middlemore Hospital.
Yeah.
And all of us, I think all of our family, I'm the youngest of 6.
Yeah.
And I think all of us were born at Middlemore, except my eldest sister, who was born at St. Helens or St. Mary's. So people who might be just
one
a tad older than us will know that hospital. And grew up here. So all my schooling was local. We lived in a state house for around, when I was born, till around 18 years old, and then we bought our first house in Otara. So it was really exciting for my parents, having lived in a state house for so long. And that house was a 3-bedroom house that costed us, I think back then, around $92,000.
Yeah.
And
I grew up in a
amazing.
house in, I don't know how familiar you are with Wellington, but Onipu Road in Lyle Bay in Wellington, and my mum paid, it wasn't flash, it actually had screw on the walls and stuff, but it was $26,000 in 1983, amazing. Even adjusted for inflation, I think that's remarkable. So what you just said there, that adds another element to what I was already going to say to you. You're kind of like, it's the classic, like, generational immigration story, right? Like, your parents came out in the 1960s. He was a bus driver, which I remember a lot of Samoan dads being in Wellington. And did you feel that, this is quite a sort of heavy thing to lead in on, but did you feel the effects of the Dawn Raids? Because I was looking at your age, you were like a year or two old, but was there anything that spilled on from that in the years to come? I'm meaning like kind of cultural unease or whatever?
Yeah, my parents told us the stories of the Dawn Raids. I definitely remember that. And Mum shared about when we got our house, they knocked on our doors looking for people. Dad worked at the Otara Billiards at the time. And he said they were raided because it was a place where a whole lot of men, or Pacific men, were hanging out, and so he assumed that that's why they came to his billiard store. And so we learned the stories, and it wasn't something that impacted on me immediately, because being the youngest of 6, we were protected from a lot of that. And Mum and Dad were really, I think there's an element of politeness, and they're very reserved people in the sense that they didn't want to come across as they were complaining about New Zealand that took them in. New Zealand was their host. You don't want to upset your host, and that's why they kept the stories really distant from us for many years, and it wasn't till probably high school, university years that we really started to engage in their experiences.
Because that's sort of meaning when I lead off, like it's like, how do you kind of chat about it day to day? Like there's a depth to like suddenly kind of like the vibe being you're not wanted here, you know?
I think they felt it soon before my father passed away.
Yeah,
we were. Dad had been sick for a while, and his conversations became really deep and meaningful. And Dad was always a very reflective man.
Yeah,
because he was a church pastor for a while. But in those latter months, he started to talk about perhaps what he had experienced of New Zealand, and maybe a bit of that sadness.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, was starting to come out then.
Do you think he had to sort of resolve it in some way, get it off his chest, just chat about it, or even just pass the stories on,
Yeah, I've never thought of it in that light.
I'll have you lying on a couch shortly. I bill by the hour. So you're born 74, 75. I'm a 76 baby, and so I always like doing this because, like, we're pretty culturally limited back then. It was 2 TV channels and so on. So I wrote down the first things I thought of. You would have been what? You would have finished. I'm just trying to think. You would have finished 7th form in 93 or 92?
91.
Somewhere around there. 91.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember the Blurple? The Blurple ice block.
Oh yes, the ice block. Oh yeah,
yeah, blue and purple.
Blue and purple.
Yeah.
What
you got? You got blue and purple.
Oh,
you got Blurple. Okay.
Yep.
This is over. This list is only about 2 minutes long, so I mean, Happy Days at 5:30.
Yes. Yep. Fonz.
Yeah. Was it quite a big moment where you were when the Thriller video came out? And yeah.
We loved Michael Jackson at home.
They showed it at the trade fair in Wellington. They actually had this is how hard media was to get a hold of back then. They had a video player or whatever, and they just played it on a loop for 2 days at our Easter show. So, what did you want to be when you grew up? Often kids will say a vet, a marine biologist, a fireman. Like, what did young Efeso want to be in primary and early high school?
Yeah, you've got me thinking.
Yeah. Were you a music guy or a...
We all played music at home
Yeah.
because we were raised in the Pentecostal movement,
Yeah.
and so all of us had an instrument.
Yeah.
But I didn't focus too much on my music. My older brothers and sisters were always being called on for church stuff, but I play the guitar, and I'm a terrible singer. They just have me at the back of the choir.
Are you an athlete? You good at sport?
Yeah, when I was at school,
Yeah.
I did more individual-based sports. So I enjoyed athletics. So I did shot put, javelin, and discus. And my brothers were more rugby players.
Yeah.
I played rugby for a little bit, a very
Discus.
little bit.
That's quite obscure.
Discus?
I know the discus. Yeah, but interesting. So how did you discover? You just were doing school athletics one day and someone spotted that you had a knack for it. I guess that's how it starts, right?
Yeah, we had some teachers. I think we were short of people.
Yeah.
And they were saying, look, we're all off to athletics, and you had all the cool ones that could go and run very far and long distances and be in the relay team.
Yeah.
And they said to me, well, Efeso, why don't you go and give that a try? And so we started with shot put. I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of resource because a lot of our focus was on other games. But we had I can remember a coach coming in from outside, and he was the guy who taught me how to hold it, kind of pouch it just inside the neck area and in your shoulder and curl up a bit, and even taught us how to swing out, which was, up until then you're just taking 2 steps forward and throwing it. But then he taught us how to turn and swirl, and I found it fascinating.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like mastering anything like that's really satisfying. It sounds kind of like a golf swing or whatever. But we've since on the map for that in New Zealand, right? Aren't we? Valerie Adams and was it a given that you would go? Like, were you set in your mind? And I actually haven't checked on this. I'm assuming you went straight to uni, didn't have a gap year or whatever.
No, I went straight to university, and I went there because Mum and Dad always wanted one of the kids to go to university.
Yeah.
But up until then, everyone had gone straight to work or to, the old tech. The polytech courses, so everyone had done that and gone on to work, and so I thought, well, I'll go to university because Mum and Dad want someone to go there, and I loved university.
But you were interested in going as well, right? You didn't do it out of just obligation.
Yeah, I think obligation weighed heavy on my shoulders.
Good on you. Yeah.
Because I thought that it was important that as a family, and we'd talked about it as brothers and sisters. They said to me, well, Efeso, you've got the opportunity to go if you do all right in bursary. And so I did all right in bursary, and I thought, well, I'll do this for the family. Everyone else, it felt like everyone else had taken the necessary hit to get work to help mum and dad.
Yeah.
And so my hit was, well, go to university, not realising just how much I'd enjoy it.
Yeah, and because you became student president, and also you were there along, you did a master's, and then kind of turned into your career with teaching and stuff, right?
Yeah, so after my master's, I did a year as the president of the Students' Association, and then I worked for about 6 years at the university, encouraging young people from low decile high schools to look to university or to look to tertiary education. So I think what I'd learned was you can enjoy it. It's a place for everybody. It's not just a place for brainy people, which is what I'd been led to believe. And then I committed these years doing something I absolutely loved. It didn't feel like work, going to high schools and ramping up young people and giving them a real sense of inspiration to go to university.
So were you behind, that would be the campus coordinator, I was going to say, because there was still those, it was sort of still, I know there wasn't compulsory student membership, but those were the days of the orientation parties being really huge, right? Big events on campus. That's kind of changed now. And I was thinking as well, like on a most basic level, I went to uni around that time, just far less brown faces at uni than now, right? I lecture at AUT, and it's just markedly different than I guess it is a while ago now. It's just showing my age. It wasn't that long ago, but it was. So that's been a good shift to see. And how long did you teach for? Was it up until you ended up running for council? Was it a career of teaching, or?
No, I spent a bit of time in lecturing in youth development and then in teacher education.
Yeah.
So I probably did it for maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
So when I left the university as the liaison officer, that was working with low decile high schools, I became a public servant. So I was in the public service for about 5 or 6 years, and then went on to do some research, and I did research on youth gangs in South Auckland.
Yeah.
And then after that found myself lecturing at both Laidlaw College and in the education department at Auckland.
I get it. So sort of combination of mentoring and community work, youth work, and then teaching. Another thing I saw on the way out the door, and these things can take a lifetime, so would you answer? Did you finish the PhD, or are you going to chip away on it and come back? It takes a long time, right?
Yeah, it does.
His face just changes. He's got like, you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my wife reminds me about it all the time. I think the
more important. Yeah, but you can come back to them, right? How far did you get into it?
No, I'd only just done the lit review.
Yeah.
And
you say just? That's significant. It's not like you'd just written the proposal for it.
Yeah, so I think it was, 25,000 words in, and then my supervisor said, look, you'd have a great time, but it's like one of the many things you're doing, and you're probably going to need a bit more focus around just doing this. And he said, no, go be what you want to be. Go lecture and enjoy expressing your passions and other things, and then come back and reflect on it. And so I thought, actually, that's a great idea. So I did a year and a half maybe in the PhD. Yeah.
I got some bad news. I just thought as you were telling me that the trouble with those 26,000 words is you'll come back to them and you'll go, how the hell, how did I get here? What's my notes system? Where are my references? I took 3 years because I had the opportunity to. I never ever set out to go that far in education. But I ended up just treating it like, I guess, a contract, kind of like to light the gas ticket at the end. So, there's different ways to do it. I don't understand those people who take 7 or 8 years, but actually chipping away at it the whole time. Yeah.
No, and I look forward to going back to it one day.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. You got to finish it. That's significant.
That's right. Yeah. And I had a great supervisor, and it's something I've always wanted to do. My wife, as I was saying, my wife's reminding me that one day that's something. But I'm enjoying where I am now because I think it's going to inform what I write about later.
Sure.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. A longitudinal study, I think they call that. The other one I don't get is people who do multiple PhDs. I've recently found out a colleague's got something like 3, and I'm like, that's actually a form of torture to do a thesis that long, that many times. So what was the shift into politics? What made you decide to run for council?
I'd always had a sense of service, and a lot of the work I've done over the years has been based around how I've led youth groups in church for a long time. I did a lot of youth mentoring. And I saw local government as being the way to continue to serve the community as an extension of what we were doing already. And it gave you access to decision-making processes and people's that might just help.
Opens doors, insights.
Absolutely. And helps the process along the way. And so I thought, if I can be a link for community groups, for young people, for people who might not understand the system, then I think this is a good way to go. So stood first time in 2013 for the local board and got in for Otara Papatoetoe and loved that as well. The challenge I had was I became chair of that local board, so I had to leave my role in lecturing because it was a full-time gig. But it's been
so
fantastic.
Is that sort of like, without sort of like everyone turning off the podcast in 2 minutes will ask this question. I'm not hugely familiar with the structure of local government. So as a local board's not council, it's like a local offshoot or satellite of that, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it. So they've got a delegated authority, and that comes from, say, the council that you're talking about. But we try our best to work together. 170 people all up, so that's a lot of people to try and get to coalesce around big decisions for the city. The
super city or Auckland, it's a lot to run from one place, right? It's a lot of different places in a lot of ways, right? Are you kind of becoming more acquainted with other parts of Auckland in the last?
Yeah, the last 6 years being on council, you get a really good insight into how everyone around the city feels about their community.
Yeah.
And maybe I see better now as to how, say, someone in Oreo or Mount Eden, the Mount Eden village, that I didn't know about until I was thinking, well, you hang out there and you understand how the village works. When I'm in Glen Eden, we lived in Glen Eden for a little while and out west. So you get a real picture of local, or a sense of local and a sense of community when you're out there, and understand that we're a really big kind of umbrella version of the city, and we've got to keep people feeling like they've got a connection that's local. So that's what I'm seeing at the moment. And I really am grateful for people talking to me because, I had lunch the other day at Puhoi. Hey, part of the city I don't regularly visit.
Well, I don't even know where that is. I'm not from Auckland. Where's Puhoi?
Rodney area. So it's on the north. And that's what I mean. We're a huge city. So getting around has been fantastic to talk to people and just get an understanding of what they see the issues as being.
How's Auckland changed in your lifetime? You can answer that any way you want.
Yeah, I think we're really open to diversity. And that's something I'm really proud of with the city, is that you made a comment earlier about how the face or the population face of universities has changed, and there's a lot more brown people, there's people with lots of different ideas and cultures at university, and that's how I see Auckland. I grew up in an area which is predominantly Pacific, and now I'm in a position which opens doors to meeting people from all over the place, and that's what I love about Auckland, is just our diversity.
I think there's still room for more people to mix and mingle more. Like, it's interesting. I feel like someone. You'll know this, that recently, and now I'm going to forget his surname, our Vice-Chancellor is a new Vice-Chancellor, Damon Salesa. He came and visited our school, and he said something really interesting. It sort of like was dangling right in front of me, but I hadn't thought of it, that New Zealand's kind of coming out of being a colonial country for years and being like a significant country in the South Pacific, and that's kind of what I see in Auckland. Like, we're going to get there one day. Like, nowhere, no mix of cultures anywhere ever is perfect, But I think we just need a bit more time to get more like somewhere like a London or whatever, where there's a bit more. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. What is it when people mix together more? Not assimilation. Let's call it cross-pollination. Yeah.
It's a great thought that he shared there, and I agree. I think it's really good. We're in the stages of we're not quite a London, maybe like a Toronto or Vancouver. And I think it's important but that's going to take some patience from everybody, and patience in the sense that some people might feel like, no, this is what we should be like, and this is how Auckland's always been. And then there's a new emerging kind of generation of people saying, well, we could do these things as well. And it's how we converse with one another patiently and maturely so that we can evolve into this city we want to.
This might sound a little bit basic, but I think often the increased cultural understandings, food and music. The more we share food and music and events like that, I think that really brings people together. I was thinking like kind of Diwali and Victoria Park and so on. People think they're just events for enjoyment, but I think they're really important. Because I think of like Carnival in the UK, the big West Indian party. So. How's Auckland changed in your lifetime? Do you still live in Otara, or you've moved on since then?
No, so
how's that area changed in your lifetime? Because it would have changed a lot, right?
Well, it's become very expensive.
Has it? Everywhere has,
I know. Well, it hasn't changed a lot. So still a whole lot of really positive youth programs still run in the area.
Yeah.
And one of the things we say about Otara a lot is one of the running mantras is only the hood can save the hood. And I go back often. I chair Otara Health, which is a social services provider in Otara. And when you're out in the community, you really get a sense of there's a lot of families who really want to do well, who remain really challenged financially. And in that regard, Otara has changed little for me. Where there has been changes, there are more people coming into the area. So the diversity has increased. We've got lots more Southeast Asian people coming in. We've got Pākehā coming in. So I think that's really good for the area.
How are the locals dealing with it? Because as I say, it takes time. It's like, everyone is, everyone, it's a process, isn't it? Right?
I think the locals have dealt with it really well. I think, given the fact that I'm Samoan, we're very hospitable, we are very welcoming, and we open our doors to anyone and everyone. And I think the community has received people in the same manner, with the same love and acceptance. And when people have that reception, you feel at home real fast. And I think that's real positive, and it's probably a mark of the community that we might not see outside of Otara much, because I think the media rhetoric has often been
it's funny because
really
it's funny you say that, because I, like, through teaching kind of like the more thinky media papers in my degree, representation comes up because it's such a big part of the media. But the funny thing with that is, like, South Auckland identifying as South Auckland and the media identifying as South Auckland, and both times it can, and this is not just South Auckland, we just happen to be talking about South Auckland, but you can create a kind of natural othering or separation when there's a lot to it, right? When you said it takes the hood to save the hood, that really interests me, because when I was reading about your youth work, I pretty much thought about that, although not that exact phrase, because that's where it all starts, right? So you've done it for a few decades now, one way or another, worked with young people. What's the common thing that they all need and want?
A sense of belonging and love, a strong family base where they know they'll be eating 3 meals a day. I think those are the real basic things that they're after. And what it does is, when you've got a strong sense of base and foundation, it helps you to continue to aspire. Earlier you asked me,
and when you're not hangry as well. When you
that's right. Yeah,
and that's a thing. That's a thing.
Yeah, that's real. And you've seen it in the lectures you must run. And I think it's really important that our young people know that they're loved. This is a community that belongs to them. They're going to be safe in this community, and in doing that, they aspire to be great things. And when one of our most prestigious youth workers, who's only recently passed away, Alan Butler, when he'd use the term "only the hood can save the hood," what he would say to people like me, whom he mentored, was, you go out to university, you go do all those things, and then bring all of that knowledge that you've learned outside of Otara and see how we can make it a part of our Otara as we grow and evolve. And so that's, I think, a lot of what we've experienced as youth workers, given the mentorship we've received. And
I looked at that word today and I thought, I've not had a lot of strong male role models in my life. So what does mentoring entail? I guess it's just staying in touch with someone, kind of being like a godfather, right? Giving advice, support, somewhere to land. along those lines, or?
Yeah, when I was at university, we ran mentoring programs, but we changed the spelling. And so what we did, so mentor, mentor, and what we did was we made it men and then capital T, capital O, capital A, tor, which means warrior. And what we were saying was it's being an example to someone and being a significant friend, but it's also holding people's hands through the battle. Given the nature of what a lot of our families are going through, we want people to know that we're right beside them. And so, when you're getting the 2 a.m. text because we don't know where little Johnny is at the moment, can someone reach out and go and look for him? That's what we mean by we're alongside our families.
What does it mean, and this is just me wanting to learn the mechanics of local government, what does it mean to be running independently but supported by Labour? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it means that we've got a bit of space. I'm not there to be just to enhance or to advocate Labour Party policy. I'm an independent because I'm going to have my own views. There'll be places where we agree, but endorsed by Labour because I wanted people to know what my values were. And so we have very similar values around being diverse and inclusive, collaborative, and it's that value base that I wanted people to understand. But it was also a message from me to the outside world, or to those who are thinking about voting, that I've stood as a Labour Party member for 6 years as the local councillor, and I didn't want people to think, well, you're suddenly an independent because you're pretending that you're not a Labour person. And this was a clear way to say I'm still going to be independent, because there have been things at council where I've disagreed with where Labour people have moved, but I can still give those values, share those values, which is we're a collaborative team and we're robust.
I don't know the outcome of the kind of strategy side of that either way, but just from a practical point of view, that makes sense that you're kind of your own man and you've got your own teams. We talked about what's great about Auckland. What's not so flash about Auckland? What are some of the issues?
I think our big issues relate to transport, housing, and our reconnecting around community facilities.
What do you mean there?
Well, we're slowly becoming the post-COVID or COVID emerging society. And I'm really keen for people to be able to reconnect once again. And in reconnecting, it's building bridges on how does someone who grew up in Otara connect and understand and converse with someone who's in Birkenhead. And I think we've got some work to do as a city to retain our sense of community, but to also understand that there are parts of the city where we don't really understand anybody.
You just far more eloquently and briefly said what I was trying to get to before, just that. How do the voices come together? Great. Yeah.
And so I think let's reconnect. Hey, let's talk. And even you and I having this conversation, I thought, a podcast is a really good way to help people, because they tune into a conversation as opposed to I could just sit here and talk about these things. And think, oh, how boring is that?
Well, you probably won't chat to anyone else for an hour or so. That's just the way. That's the way the media is. It's a time constraint thing. In practicality, how do you connect someone from Otara with someone from Birkenhead? I mean, I know it happens. People work together and whatever. But you need to think about the practical, practical end of these things, eh?
Yeah. A couple of ideas.
I think it's food and music.
No. I was going to say festivals is a great way to bring people together. Look at Pasifika.
Totally.
Diwali, all of those festivals, Lantern Festival, these are exciting. But when we were growing up, or I should say we, because it might not have happened for you, but when I was growing up, we did lots of school what do you call it? Those school partnership things. So our school in Otara, we would often go up against Maclean's, which is in Howick. In that area.
No, I didn't do that, Wellington, but it makes sense because Auckland's bigger,
Yeah, and then we'd do partnerships with schools over the shore. I remember I was in a debating team at Tangaroa, and we were always up against the debating team from Dio.
Sport's another one.
So sports brings people together, and it's good. And for young people, you want to be on the field, you want to get to know each other, you want to check out the talent. We were all young once. You want to see who's that nice looking person sitting across the table.
Oh, you do mean that kind of talent, right?
And we're going to share a coffee, and then before you know it, your friends on Instagram and you stay in touch. And I think that's one way we can do it. But I'd like to see us sharing markets. I was at the Hobsonville market last week. loved it. I thought, wow, look at the food they're serving. Look at people sitting around having coffee, just chilling with anyone. Some people even greeted me and said, "Oh, come and have a seat with us. Let's talk about your mayoralty." And I think when we get people to markets, the Otara,
and everyone should go to Otara and Avondale. They're the OGs. And you'll find some table of some random. How did this person get all these different things on this table at the back of the Avondale markets? Yeah.
See, that's what I think will bring people to, and that's the starting point of how we build relationships. And all of a sudden, you feel like, they're not so different from me. They've got similar issues to me, but we've got to start with something. And I think starting with food, getting around, get the beanbags out and listen to some music or get up and dance. That's the stuff that brings people together naturally, sports and entertainment. And then we can start talking about what the deeper issues are.
You heard it here first. Auckland is getting a lot of beanbags, a lot of beanbags coming. What else? I think it was one point. Yeah. What else? I mean, you run for the because you're proud of the place you're from, but you also run because you want to fix things. So I know about the free public transport. I think that's a great idea. What else? What else do you see that kind of needs a bit of a like a fitted sheet that needs folding?
Look, I think there's some serious conversations we need to have, especially around what we're going to do when it comes to intensifying. What parts of Auckland have heritage protections, and whether we can make some of that thinking and regulation a bit more liberal. We have, I think the Salvation Army said we're about 30,000 houses off. That's the mark we're off. And obviously they're not all going to be in Auckland, but if we think about it, we want to be a city that includes everybody. And that means we should set ourselves the ambitious goal of not having any homelessness in Auckland.
There are a number of houses, the number of beds needed is unsettling, because I think of land banking. Like I bought an apartment on Wakefield Street just so I could, I wasn't going to be able to buy a house. And I didn't realise till about 6 months into living there, because we had a fire alarm. I'm like, hardly anyone's come out of the building. And it's like, like a lot of these places are empty, just bought by people that maybe have not even set foot here. So that's an aside. I mean, I know you kind of have a response or a fix to that, but it's funny, it seems an uneven model. What about the Central City? People bang on about the Central City. I mean, it's tough at the moment. We've had COVID, and we've had obviously the works for the rail is hugely disruptive. I was just saying to Jake yesterday, because I told you I podcasted with Jake, I'm like, I think it's really tough at the moment. And, if I owned a business, that would be really hard to swallow. But surely it's going to kind of all come up roses once the rail's in and we're a bit more out of the pandemic. Are you optimistic?
Oh, I'm really optimistic. And I want to acknowledge that some of
Have you still got a coffee shop around here, or are they all closed?
Yeah, quite a few of them have closed.
We're in the middle of Auckland CBD, folks, where the council chambers are on Albert Street. Sorry, continue.
No. And so I think we got to acknowledge that some businesses have folded because it's been tough times for them. And
it's hard to see.
Both COVID and both the development, with the CRL. But I'm hopeful that as the CRL goes in, we're going to get really good movement throughout the city. We'll have people coming in, we'll have the cruise ships coming, so there'll be a lot of visitors coming back into the central city area. So I think that's really good. And keep in mind there are currently around 44,000 people who make this area their home. So if we build it so it feels like both a visitor attraction and a place where people feel like there's a sense of community. Look, there's some great parks here. Aotea Square just out there. You've got Myers Park. Imagine if we did some of the local stuff here. Often we think of the local stuff in suburban areas, but we've got to see the central city as part of that residential local area too.
Often language is really important, which you've already talked about in this podcast in a different context. And Jake said something about that yesterday. He goes, I've got to stop calling it the CBD. It's not just a business district. And I was like, there's definitely something in that. I also think that, and this is not an original thought, you would have heard it from others, that, a lot of New Zealanders, recent immigrants aside, are not apartment dwellers, not native apartment dwellers. So I think a lot of people still romanticize about that, whatever you call it, quarter acre block or whatever. I'm actually a minority in my building, but more people, naturalising to apartments will be something that I think will come with the rail and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's tough out there right now, right?
Yeah.
CBD is a bit hairy.
Yeah.
Sorry, not the CBD, the central living area that I live in. Yeah.
Central City.
Yeah, Central City. Yeah,
the inner city,
Central.
they call it. Yeah. And I live in an apartment too.
Yeah.
I just live in one in Otahuhu.
Yeah.
But we made that decision because we wanted to be close to amenity, close to the bus. We had 2 cars. We're now down to 1 car. So we were thinking about, well, what's our responsibility?
Less
to
work to maintain if you're busy.
Oh, I'm the youngest, remember? So my brothers were big boys, and they used to say, Efeso, you go out and mow the lawns. And so not having to mow lawns was answered prayer.
I've got a dishwasher, and I had no dishwasher till I was till like early 30s. It's true, man. Yeah, hand mower. Yeah, you pay your body. It's a pros and cons thing, isn't it? So you don't have a yard, but you pay your body court.
Yep.
Things get looked after for you. I sort of moved you off your main point there. Sorry.
But apartment living is great, and what it does is, if we plan well, I don't think we've planned the city well, but if we're planning for an urban compact city, then we're going to have good local amenities. So we'll have parks, you'll have your cafe, you'll get the benefit of a cafe. Where I live, we live next to, our apartment complex is next door to the library, the gym, and there's a supermarket 5 minutes away. All of those things is how that kind of urban planning should be now. So if we can, but that's going to be a challenge, because there are some who still believe my dream is the quarter acre. They can have that, but that only results in sprawl, and what we want is good urban form compact.
You brought up something else that I wanted to talk about with either of you, but I just kind of was like, I didn't know if you guys would know the history, but I'll try it. Like, Auckland literally has a history of poor planning, right? It's actually like documented. Do you kind of know the gist of the story? I mean, I could have looked it up. Do we have town planners? Is it just a succession of... I think the story is we developed too quickly in the 60s or 70s or something like that, right? There's something that happened that kind of stuffed it all up, is what I remember being told. Yeah,
and I've listened to... So the Infrastructure Commission, they've just produced a report, and I've just been taking some of the detail from their report, but they talked about how we didn't... intensify or densify in the central part, because at that stage back in the 60s everyone had a car and you could travel fast. We didn't have high population rates, so it didn't matter so much congestion,
and there was a real push for roads from road road affiliated people.
Roads were safe, they were tar sealed, you had all of that. And so if you lived, say, in Mount Roskill or in Mangere, you could get into town pretty easy because you had a car and you could move quickly. That's all changed. We've now got, population of 1.7 million people. We've got a housing shortage of close to 30,000 houses. So it means we've got to do more with little space. You know how they often say, in your budgets, you've got to do more with little money. Well, we've got to do the same around our planning. We don't have a lot of space, so how do we share it more?
The other thing with that that's so hard is that kind of pass the baton thing, right? So I lived in Melbourne for years, and again, this is sort of like hearsay. Read a couple of articles, got the general gist. My understanding is Melbourne, luckily, has had the opposite fortune in that it's had a succession of very good, not only town planners, but also people kind of passing that baton. So that's a difficult thing as well, right, in any kind of politics. Like, how long's the mayoral, not candidacy, what's it called? The term. Is it 4 years or 3 years?
It's 3 years. So it's
and how do you feel about that? Is it a long time? Because I listened to a podcast, believe it or not, Barack Obama agreed to do a long-form podcast before he left office, albeit there were choppers around the building, something like here. But he said something that I thought, man, that's a great kind of like metaphor. He was like, people wanted me to do all this and do that and do all these things really quickly. It's a container ship. I had the container ship for 3 years. So if you think about a container ship moving, you can only kind of get it that far.
I quite like that container ship analogy.
Yeah, you can use it. If I see you say that, if I see you say that in the media, I told you he was going to get beanbags.
Look, I'm realistic, but I think what's needed at this point in Auckland's history is ambition. And by setting high ambition, it will help people focus on what the goals are. And if we're all lifting our eyes to what the goals are. So that's why I came out with fares-free public transport. We've got an ambition. But it says more than just getting rid of the cost impediment. It also talks to climate emissions and our desire to get out of our cars. It talks to how we're going to create a city that is much, much more compact in its urban design so that we're walking more and that we're connecting with people more. So by setting high ambition, and then as one one thing, and then you set up the teams so that you can get there. And I think we've got to staircase towards those big ambitions. That's possible for our city. The planning is something we've really got to deal to. And unfortunately, we don't have the Auckland Planning Office anymore, or Development Office. That was changed in this term of council. So one idea I had is, if elected, why not have a chief sustainability planning officer or someone to really set the agenda, or help to guide the agenda on how we get to the goals that the Auckland City
my take, whether it's local politics or national politics or global politics, the main issue is climate change and the environment. It's like the other, the economics and all of that, it's important, but it's a people-made construct, right? It's really, really important. It's interesting because a friend wanted me to ask you about kind of how you address climate change locally as a local government, What do they say? Think global, act local. But how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, you get people.
You got your Keat Cup, you've got your scooter. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it is those things,
it's all
right?
Those things.
Yeah.
But I think we can do we can make a serious impact by getting out of our cars as a first port of call for reducing our emissions. And that's where transport is so important.
The lanes are great. I've got a bike, honestly. They're so good they've gone in. And they'll get used more and more and more, I was coming back to your sustainability officer idea, like, I know it's only an idea. Would it be that, they'd be out and about in different parts of Auckland? Because you just made me think about us talking about apartment living. I don't know about yours, but one thing that bugs me at my building is no one really sorts any of the rubbish. There's kind of two big empty... There's something about apartment living where everyone's just throwing stuff in the main bin like it's 1972, and that bothers me. So I wouldn't, I kind of like the sustainability officer to kind of put a letter in everyone's letterbox. I mean, there's those little things that are important.
One of the cool things we do at our apartments, we're only 85 units.
Yeah.
But it means that we can
That's
actually
not small,
congregate.
though.
Yeah. So it's a good group of people. And we can congregate every so often, every 6 to 8 months we try and get together for a barbecue and that. And we haven't done a lot over COVID, but that's our opportunity to talk to people. And it's also our opportunity to say, and by the way, guys, don't forget when you're taking out your plastics, it's your plastics. And it's another reminder to gently... You
know what my building's version of that is? Passive aggressive notes occasionally left on the cork. Well, it's so much more. We wouldn't have a barbecue anyway. I don't even know who's in the building.
Yeah. And again, I think that comes back to the relationship. If you've got a good relationship with people think, this is about a shared facility. And I think the big issue for Auckland to discuss is, how do we share more? I'm glad you've got a bike. That means, it's got to go somewhere. We've got limited infrastructure. Do we create the bike lanes? And look at some of the arguments we're having already. That we've got a parking strategy that's out, and people just shut down straight away, and they say, this is terrible. They're going to take away car parking, and they don't look at the wider picture of, this is a growing city.
Well, also they've come up kind of like indoctrinated without realising it in an oil and road-based world. I mean, we all have. That's not me saying other people have, but for some people it's harder to get out of that mindset than others, because it's a huge freaking change. It's massive. Everything changes, right? Supply chains, you name it. It also made me think now, and that's great. I've talked to a mate about how anonymous my building is, and he was just kind of basically like, suck it up. That's apartment living. You've said yours is different to that, but I think one of the issues with my building is, again, those absentee landlords. So there's kind of a bunch of tenants there who, if you've got more owner occupiers, I think that probably creates it a bit more.
There's been a lot of research around the world done on ghost houses as well, and there's the idea that there are 30,000 ghost houses in Auckland, might be including apartments, and it's hard to work out.
I'd believe
that
it
data.
Based on my building. Yeah.
And I think that's another issue that we've got to face up to, and whether it's a sustainability officer or someone from council, maybe from the mayor's office, who gets out and says, well, if you're not going to use this space, let's share it. And again, it comes back to how we share. And the unfortunate issue, I think, for many New Zealanders is that housing has been so commodified that it's an asset that makes you money. So we've turned it into a business operation, as opposed to, let's look at housing as a basic human right. And when we start to shift that thinking that you're talking about, then I think we'd be a bit more open to sharing what we have.
Yeah, you're right. That mindset, I mean, that's a well-known narrative, right? That mindset that's shifted since the early 80s globally and here. I mean, you started off talking about your state house, didn't you?
Yeah.
So there you go. I wanted to ask about council, because it's sort of a mystery to a lot of us, I think, and that's why we're here, talking long form. You know, whether it's something silly or fun or something with a bit more teeth to it. Like, what do you think what misconceptions do the public have about council?
I think that the leading misconception that people have is that we are much like central government, that we have a lot of money coming in the door, and a lot of the things that we can do don't need law changes. Yeah. And I think it's important that people understand that the law setup, you know, all the legislation work happens in Parliament, and we get more of the regulatory function. So, you know, we can have this type of shop, you can have this type of house, and our role as council is to make sure that people are abiding by those regulations. And so I don't think we can be as large-minded as many people would hope we could be. And I think that's something we need to actually talk to the government about, because I'd like to see a bit more of the money that goes to the Crown come back to Auckland Council, because we're the ones who are facilitating so much of the economic and artistic cultural growth in the nation. And we're going to need money to support that. You know, we've got the CRL going in, we've got so much.
And you could argue you're more on the front line as well, you know.
And we're helping to facilitate communities. You know, we talk a lot about place making and place shaping. Well, we're also the place where communities connect, where they feel a sense of home, and that's going to need resource too. So I think we do great with the limited resource that we have, but I'd like to see us collapse the distance perhaps between central government and local government, so that a lot more financial support came back to Auckland.
Yeah, what else do you think that people misconstrue about that was a great answer, misconstrue about local government?
That we're MPs, and that we're, you know, there's often talk of, they're in the, I don't know if I should say this now, but, you know, they're out of the public trough. People saying, they're just taking from the public trough. When I tell people I took a pay cut to come to this role,
of course you did.
People realise, I think, wow, there's a really genuine, honest element of public service in these roles, and people give their best. We don't all agree, but it's important that people represent their communities. And I think it's important that the public understand that we come into these roles for the genuine desire to make an impact, to serve the community. And that might take a bit of the edge out of some of the Facebook posts and some of the tweets that people put out, because it can get pretty vicious, even in the smear campaign.
Look, everyone having a voice, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Often the worst of times. Yeah, absolutely. And so, since the Super City, this building's here, like, this is the level of basic stuff I want to know. Does everyone come to work to this building every day, like most councillors? Everyone comes here? I mean, not forget COVID and all of that, but the idea is that the council gathers here,
in the
works
main,
from here?
So in the main, because we've had buildings, remember we were 7 councils before amalgamated. And so a lot of the old buildings that are no longer in use, because we've centralised a lot of our service and our staffing, most people would come into this building, but we still have Manuko, where people were using the Civic Centre building there. There's still a bit happening. And then we've got local board offices around the place, and that gives the local boards an opportunity to meet, and some of their civil service support.
Right, the board you talked about that you were on before.
That's right.
And, the general, I mean, this is sort of like, you won't have hard data, but general consensus from people who've been in and around council for any amount of time now, is it that becoming one super city was a good thing or not so good thing? I've got no horse in this race. I'm just genuinely curious, because I started reading about it today and I was like, okay, I know enough about this now. I don't need to keep reading, but I was like, it's a big change. Is it more efficient?
Yeah, I reckon when people think about issues like transport, electrifying the trains, people say, the super city was a really good move. Because it's helped us get through, we're going to electrify the trains. In the old days, Auckland might say, well, let's electrify, but we've got to have a conversation with...
Or I picture like someone with
New
a
Lynn,
clipboard
stops.
signing it off every time it goes through a different... Yeah.
So I think in
classic bureaucracy.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in that regard, when it comes to the big decisions for a growing city, for a huge
Makes
city,
sense,
great population, it's been great. Where I think people feel challenged is that they have lost a sense of local, and that they still want us to be focused on their communities. I talked a little bit about the village, and local communities. And I think what's challenging is when you're a councillor, you're almost like an MP based in Auckland who looks at regional activity and regional policy, but people still want to say, but my street, I've got a pothole on my street and I need you to fix it. So it's getting the
Coming
balance.
back to your first point, I want you to change the law tomorrow. No more potholes.
So it's getting the balance between what councils used to do, because in the old days you could probably ring your local councillor in Rodney and say, look, there's some potholes down this road, come and have a look at it, and then your local councillor can do that because that's how it was organised. It's very different now when so much of our time is spent in this office and we get little time to be in the community.
This is like, who are the people in your neighbourhood on Sesame Street? You just got me thinking, like, mayoralty planning aside, what does a day as a councillor look like for you? Average day, what sort of things will you do over the day in your role?
Average day for most councillors, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, are sitting in meetings. So we've got committee meetings, and that's depending on the committees you have. We have what we call committees of the whole.
Is it death by committee? Be honest.
Sometimes it feels
Just
like
wave your hand, move your hand. It won't be on record.
And some of those committee meetings can go for a long time. But and that's because there's serious issues there, and there's 21 people around the table, and so chairing those committees can be a tough job. So in the main, most people are in those committee meetings usually between, say, 10, 5, 6, and if you can fit it in, what most people will do is have a few meetings in the morning before that 10 o'clock start, and then try and fit some meetings in afterwards. So that's probably the normal day. And then you've got... You try and treat Friday. We try not to have meetings in the city on a Friday.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we have a low electronic contact day on Friday at work. Like, try not to send an email if you don't need to. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea. Yeah. So, like, if it's something about something coming up in a month, send it on Tuesday. And if a student's arm's fallen off, email me on a Friday.
Yeah, that's right. That's important enough.
Yeah.
And so Friday we treat as our community day, or the weekends. And so Friday we're out in the community. Just, you might connect with your local board. You'll have people come and see you. What I do. Yeah. But I try and spend Mondays and Fridays based locally, and just be in this office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when all of our big meetings are on. And it means that people can access you. And even if we're on a Zoom meeting, you've got you're not trying to run between meetings to get anywhere. You've got a bit of time between Zooms, so you can actually have phone calls with people and meet with people.
And how were back-to-back Zoom meetings day in, day out during lockdown?
Yeah. Zoom got crazy.
Did your cat run in the room or anything? Did someone put the filter on by mistake?
Yeah,
you saw those videos?
Yeah, I've seen those. Are
the
great,
guy with the cat face on and he can't remove it.
And I've got 2 young daughters, and my youngest is 2 years old, and she has walked in because we're in a 2-bedroom apartment. Yeah. So remember, I've got the 9-year-old. She's on the laptop for school. My wife is also on Zooms, and so we're trying to work out these spaces. So it's been hilarious, but it's we've worked out a system that works for us because the 2-year-old doesn't want to be left out. She's thinking, well, how come I don't get a device? And so she'll come in and sit in meetings, and the councillors have been really generous.
I like it, man. What's wrong with that? It's like how attitudes have changed to bringing your kid to work. I've taught from. I'm just going to go back in 2 weeks back on campus at AUT, but we have taught. In my instance, I've taught in my spare room since August last year. Yeah. So I look at Melbourne and I go, because they had the longest lockdown in the world, right? 2 years of that, or whatever, a year and a half of that, hard, eh? Oh. Did you enjoy aspects of it? Being at home more, or the lockdown, just any of them, the whole COVID thing we've been through.
Yeah, I did. It was tough though on my oldest daughter, and she really missed we've got big families.
Teenager?
No, she's 9.
And
she, lots of friends at school. And the second big lockdown for us was particularly hard for her. And, there was the novelty of being on FaceTime or Zoom in the first lockdown, but she didn't enjoy. She just missed the social interaction. I think we all did, and we probably were so well organised around what we knew we had to do that it got a bit stale. And just think, man, do we ever get to go outside and be with people? I missed people interaction.
To give your daughter's age and Zoom meetings, someone told me, a friend of mine who's got a young son or daughter, son who's 8, said, as hard as it was to homeschool and all the rest of it, he said, you've never seen anything cuter than a Zoom classroom full of 8-year-olds. He goes, it's like a bag of puppies. It was just like little faces and stuff. I was like, you got to take the nice moments where you can. Really, just to finish off, I think, because you'll go a couple minutes longer. Has Phil given you any tips? Have you spoken to Phil? Have you spoken to the mayor about the job? Yeah. I mean, you want to know what the job is, right?
Yeah, no, we've had some good conversations. He's talked a lot about having to have...
He's an OG.
Your mind across everything. Yeah. And there's so much happening in this city. He's talked about the value of building good relationships with the council.
Are you resilient? People are awful. We just talked about social media. Like, are you resilient? I'm too sensitive, man.
Yeah, no, I'm a pretty strong person. I think.
Don't read the comments.
Yeah, no, and already I say I don't bother.
Yeah.
I'll put up my Facebook post and I'll walk away. And I think it's the challenge there though is the family reads it. I've got I've got cousins and my wife.
If you remember the worst of it, and I know you know this, I'm preaching to the choir saying you know this. It's the person who's not well is the person posting the worst stuff. Like they're not well. That's someone who's not well. Yeah. That's the way I see it. Yeah. But you still don't want to read it. Yeah. So back to Phil, what he's told you.
Yeah, so relationships are key. Make sure you get around, get an understanding of all the issues. Where possible, try and get out into the community and understand what's happening there. But he's also really warned that this is anywhere between 60 and 80 hours a week.
Yeah, of course.
And so you're going to be here. Yeah. And so I've been really grateful for that. But I've got a bit of a setup in my mind as well, and some great ideas that I think I could bring to the role, because I'm really open to how we connect. And I remember when I used to run mentoring programs. Mentoring program is probably the closest I can connect to this, because young people don't wait for 9 to 5 to text you and say, these are my issues.
Well, what do you mean? They just text anytime?
They just text anytime. They expect their answers immediately. It's probably about like half the population we deal with here. So you get a bit of a groove and a rhythm for working with people, having worked with young people all my life. So I'm quite excited. I think there's a real opportunity here to lift our eyes and to be part of something quite historic, because COVID's been a challenge for many families.
Amen.
And here's our chance to say, what does the new Auckland look like? What does the Auckland where people aren't always going to be working in an office look like? What does where are the hubs where we'll connect? How are we going to really encourage our young people to flourish, get beside them and see them enjoy life? So I think those are the kinds of opportunities we have, because we're facilitating that at council.
From a narrative point of view, this isn't great. I should have asked this earlier, but it's hard to see the screen at the best of times. I was really glad to see that you're close to the unions, because I haven't liked seeing the unions, lose their visibility over my lifetime as a part of the whole neo-lib thing we brushed over before, but kind of didn't mention. Yeah. So, how did that come about? Like, how did you become someone? Is that through having a working father, or?
Yeah, well, both parents, but Dad was driving most of the time. And Mum was a cleaner at Middlemore for many years and was part of the Service and Food Workers Union. And that's where we got a lot of our union connection. And so this for me goes back to when Mum was on picket lines to get increase in
so
wages.
Important, man.
Yeah, I look back. I often say to Mum, I remember the day she came home and she said to us, I can't remember what year it was, and she said, "Look, I've got an increase in pay," and we all were celebrating. Yeah. And I think it was something like she'd gone up to $8.29 per hour. Yeah. And I look back now in my situation, I think I don't know how we did did it. Hey,
but there is inflation.
But you look back now and you think, for everything that they did, they've been amazing. And for a Samoan family, I think it's important people understand our context too. It wasn't just getting by on the bills here. There was money going back to Samoa.
Of course,
so all of that was happening. So that's where the union connection came, and then it was I'm all about fighting for workers' rights because I saw what Mum would do. Mum would often go in to support her colleagues when they had employment meetings.
Yeah.
And Mum used to say to us, I don't have the best English, but I just feel sorry because they don't understand what's going on. They've got this letter that no one can read. And so we were getting, we were at university at the time. Yeah. So we were the kids who would read the letters to help outline to our parents, this is the issue, so that when they went into the meetings, they had a bit of a plan. So for me, unions have stood beside working families forever. And that's why
It's interesting. So you're almost like the informal kind of legal team or whatever. You were reading for the documents. Exactly, it's really interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, because what revived it for me was coming into academia late in life and realising that there's a really strong union, the T. I'm going to forget the name of it, TEU, and I was like, I don't think anyone's ever even mentioned a union to me in any job I've had before this in the last. So I don't know. Again, this is anecdotal. I have no data, but I've got a feeling that a lot of young people in work these days, no one mentions the union, right? Like not a lot of people unionise now, except for a few key industries and so on.
Yeah, and it's not until we understand the kind of universal benefits that come from that support that unions provide that people will feel like, this is a great idea.
Verbal high straight down from up above.